Hi everyone. We're very lucky today. We have Irfan Khan and Mathieu O'Neil, Kate Holland and Xiaolan Cai talking about, where's the title? COVID-19 online health professional engagement with rumour-based and factual hashtags on Twitter. So Irfan Khan is an assistant professor at the Canberra Business School, and his research interest centres around social media technologies and how they can be used as a means for social support and benefit health consumers and healthcare organisations. Mathieu O'Neil, associate professor of communication, leads the Critical Conversations Lab here at the University of Canberra. He's also Honorary Associate Professor of Sociology at the ANU, where he contributed to founding the Virtual Observatory for the study of online networks. We also have Kate Holland. Are you talking today, Kate? No. Okay. Kate is the Senior Research Fellow in the News and Media Research Centre, and her research examines communication about public health issues with current projects focusing on COVID-19 and mental health issues. Xiaolan, is Xiaolan with us? Oh, hi Xiaolan. Sorry, I don't have a bio for you, but Xiaolan's here as well. So fantastic.
She's a PhD student at the News and Media Research Centre.
Lovely. Wonderful. Okay, so we'll kick it off. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. One warm welcome to the world of COVID-19. And today we're going to talk about COVID-19 misinformation. And thank you for being here. First of all, I would like to acknowledge my co-researcher, Mathieu O'Neil, who actually led this project. And I would also like to acknowledge Kate Holland and Xiaolan Cai. So obviously, without your input, this research would not have happened. So today we are going to talk about misinformation, and a lot of research has been done in the domain of misinformation, but specifically in this research, we have looked at how our Australian health professionals engaged with rumor-based and factual hashtags on Twitter. So I'll get to the next slide. Okay, so some background information related to health misinformation. I'm not going to go through everything related to misinformation. We all know what misinformation is. So it's about spreading intentionally or unintentionally spreading false or misleading information using social media or other digital platforms. And we have seen that the research around misinformation has been happening for a long period of time. Even before the pandemic, there are significant research has been done to track misinformation among anti-vaxxers. And we have, and the movement that takes place around that particular area. So a lot of research that has been done. And since the beginning of COVID-19, the misinformation actually has attracted a lot of attention from academics, scholars, the healthcare agencies, as well as the governments. Because one of the primary reasons why that we see such attention towards misinformation is basically because it can hinder healthy behaviors such as mask wearing and social distancing, and which actually poses a lot of threat to the public health outcomes. So a few research actually have been conducted in recent times. For example, Quan Bulger at 2020, they have studied 110 websites and found that basically only 10% of the websites that have studied had all four quality managed to meet the quality criteria by JAMA, or American Medical Association benchmark. And another research conducted by Galati 2020, they have also analyzed more than 100 million Twitter messages at the early stages of the epidemic's spread, and they have found that there is a massive wave of potentially unreliable information, which is preceding the rise of COVID-19 infections. So these are some of the early studies that have also been done to debunk the extent of misinformation. For example, in terms of the governments or health authorities effort to debunk misinformation, we have seen that there is a significant erosion in trust in expert authority and public institutions. For example, studies conducted in Italy, so we have got the Italian references in here, but there are other studies, for example, studies conducted in UK also has seen that there is a significant erosion in trust in public health authorities. So that makes debunking misinformation even more challenging for health authorities. Although in Australia, it is the scenario is a little bit more favorable. Our very own, is that Sora Park, right? So yeah, Sora, she has actually conducted an analysis in terms of the spread of misinformation in Australia, and it has shown that scientists and health experts were the most trusted source of information about the coronavirus in Australia. So in March to January 2020, it was found that much of the misinformation about the coronavirus remain unchecked and continue to circulate, particularly on Twitter. So 59% of the Twitter posts rated as false in the study sample by a study conducted by Brandon et al. And that actually sort of, that is one of the underlying reasons why we have actually chosen Twitter as a platform to conduct analysis or conduct how misinformation spreads and how our health professionals engage with misinformation in social media platforms. So what we have done, so our research aim was we conducted content and network analysis of how a sample of Australian health professionals connected to COVID-19 factual and rumor-based information on Twitter in 2020. Healthcare professionals, and the reason why we have chosen healthcare professionals because they are assumed to be better attuned to accurate and reliable updates concerning public health information. So obviously they are the trusted source of health-related information, and that is why it was important for us to see how health professionals engage with misinformation, and so they are obviously they are considered as the best case scenario for health information diffusion. So what we have done is we review the literature on COVID-19 misinformation, and then we present our case study, analytical choices, and the methodology we use to constitute data sets. So I will go through the recent literature or the findings of the recent literature, and then Matthew will take over the methodology and explain how we have developed the data sets in relation to this study. So some of the key findings of the literature review that we have conducted. Have First of all, we must mention this particular notion that there is a plethora of studies that have actually been found in relation to the COVID-19 research. So a lot has been done, and Matthew actually termed it as paperдemic, and obviously I completely agree with that. So the profound impact of COVID-19, it has resulted an explosion of research into COVID-19, and a Google Scholar search has resulted in February 2021. We found 3.5 million results for COVID-19. But obviously, one of the main concerns or one of the main issues that we have identified in terms of the research that had been conducted, that obviously the reliability and validity of the many publications. So most of these publications that we have come across are not peer reviewed, and apart from that, they're methodologically questionable in terms of how they have constructed the data set or the reliability and validity testing in terms of their overall methods that they have used. Apart from that, there are some other studies which have shown that, for example, Sinelli, I'm not going to mention all these, so compared data from Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Reddit, and Gap, and found that misinformation and valid information is spread in similar ways. So they found a common pattern in terms of the spread of misinformation as well as the factual information. Apart from that, another interesting finding of the recent literature related to COVID-19, obviously one of the key theoretical terms in terms of the literature review was the network structure, which refers to obviously we have seen that the echo chamber effect plays a very important role. And if the high and also the high density favors diffusion, so the dense the network is, so if there are a lot more participants in a given network, obviously the diffusion of misinformation, or it could be diffusion of information, tend to be higher. So the network structure plays a very, very important role. Oh, I should have muted my mobile, sorry about that. Anyway, and another mainstay of research literature is that the echo chamber effect, so that misinformation spreads almost instantaneously within one group, and so segregated that it does not reach to other. And echo chamber effect, so that means like misinformation tend to spread within a similar group, within a similar belief system, and if the network density is higher, it tends to spread faster. And another point was COVID-19 misinformed communities are denser and more organized than informed communities. So that's quite an interesting finding by Mamon and Curley. So I'll get Mathieu to talk about the research strategy in terms of how we have formulated the overall research design. Thank you, Mathieu.
Hi, everybody. So I don't know if my head's going to be in some tutorial. So I guess one of the concerns that we had was to not contradict the actor network theory precept that you shouldn't superimpose like a pre-made theory onto reality, because you can do that and then you're basically just sort of deciding what you're going to find before looking at it. So they want to just trace connections between all sorts of actants in the network, which can be human or non-human. So that's very good. We agree with that ethic of inclusion. But not all actants are the same, and so previous research that I've done either with Rob Ackland or with Bethany and Mahin, we've introduced several sets of distinctions. And so we distinguish, for example, actants who can make connections, and so these could be humans or they could be bots, from issue actants who cannot, okay? So, and we focus on hashtags, and we also make a distinction between field hashtags and frame hashtags. So this means that we think that actants have a reflexive quality, and they know that there are different perspectives in a debate or a controversy. So they know that for example, in Australia, hashtag Auspol is pretty much where politics happens in Australia. So everybody uses that. But when there was the marriage equality debate, people who are proponents of marriage equality would use that hashtag marriage equality, whereas opponents would not. So that seems that they're using a hashtag to espouse a particular perspective or push a particular agenda. So we make a similar distinction between COVID-19 field hashtags, which everybody uses, and frame hashtags, which are only used by one side. For example, hashtag 5G would only be used by people who think that 5G is linked to the spread of COVID and who believe in conspiracies, whereas wear a mask would only be retweeted by people who trust the advice of public health authorities. And so we've got different kinds of actors. And now in terms of behavior, we focus on retweets because retweeting is a strong indicator of the willingness to spread information that you agree with. Because the information is shared as it is. There's no preface, no comment. Like sometimes people share something they disagree with, but they put a kind of a quote, they quote it, and so there's a distance, whereas when you retweet, you're just retweeting as it is, and basically you're spreading it. Yeah, there's also other kind of different affordances, to use the term that's popular, in contrast to @mentions, where only the mentioned user can read a tweet, and arguably @mentions or @reply would be more useful to map agonistic debate and confrontation with other perspectives. So the research method is that we wanted to construct data sets of health professionals and tweets and hashtags. So it's quite a, I apologize, it's a little bit of a convoluted process to get to the final data set. As you will see when I show you the graph, we had quite a complex journey. So we created a data set of tweets which had these hashtags such as coronavirus, COVID hoax, etc. And so we classified them into field or frame hashtags, and we ensure, and we we always had a guarantee by taking either keywords or field hashtags such as COVID-19, for example, to make sure that if we picked up hashtag 5G, it wouldn't be unrelated to COVID. Like some people tweet about with hashtag 5G, but it's not to do with COVID, it's just about 5G. So, and then we divided them into rumors or facts, and then we ensured they were valid. And so we found these frame hashtags that we divided into rumor or fact-based, so conspiracy theories such as 5G, Agenda 21, Bill Gates, ID 21, Obamagate, Deep State, QAnon, the origins of the virus. If there's any questions about, I'm just going to go quickly, if there's any questions about what any of these mean, you can ask after or now if you want. But yeah, so where it comes from, so the sort of China connection, then the severity or cure, so it's a hoax, you know, and then the fake kind of solutions such as
Yeah.
Is that the way it's supposed to be said? Is that spelled properly? It's hydroxychloroquine. Okay, I'm sure. I used to be able to say that pretty quickly. And then fact-based hashtags. So we divided those into pandemic slogans. You know, like what we should be doing, physical protection. You know, COVID's lockdown, Melbourne, and then social behaviour. I mean, you know, these distinctions are slightly. There's a bit of overlap, obviously. Social distancing, stay at home. Okay, so that's the categories. Now, are you ready? This is the methods. So we had different data sets, but I mean, there's a lot of text, and I think you're all sick of hearing text. So I'll show you a graph because that makes it clearer, right? So here's the graph. So I'll try and explain this as best I can. So we started with some keywords, an initial data set of tweets to basically have something to work with, and then from there, we collected the people who had, or accounts that had tweeted that, and we found, you know, sorted them. We eliminated by location. So, you know, if they were from Australia, and also by occupation, that gave us 51. So I'm right at the top here. That gave us 51 accounts. We checked those manually or with the Australian Health Professional, you know, Association, to see if they were legitimate health professionals, and we got one seed account. From that seed account, we snowballed from it, you know, and with the follower network, and we got 4,099 Twitter accounts. So then we sorted them for location, and we got 1,554 Australian health professional accounts. And then we basically, okay, I'm going to summarize. We collected a lot of tweets, and we used the first collection initial data set to sort these automatically, these Australian health professional accounts according to their occupation and their specialization, using what's known as a naive-based classifier. So we used the first data set to train automated learning, automated techniques to sort the second, much larger data set, basically. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's the basic the gist of it. Now some of these figures are wrong, and we haven't had a chance to judge them. We now have, I think, 4,000. Oh no, maybe that's correct. I'll have to check later because we've just changed some results recently. So, but this slide hasn't been updated, so there might be a discrepancy. And I'm going to pass the baton back to Irfan.
Okay, so as you can see from this table, and hopefully this table makes sense, like, so this table actually portrays the Twitter accounts of authors of collected accounts featuring rumor and factual hashtags. So as you can see that it has been classified as the general practitioner, specialists, nurses, researchers, public health, epidemiologists, etc. So it's pretty much self-explanatory, as you can see that. So we have got GP, which is quite low. We only had 19, and then specialist we had the. Is this figure correct, right? So we had got 199 specialist accounts.
There's also.
Right? Yeah,
8 in academia, so I guess there's some academic GPs.
Yeah,
so that's 27 in total. Yeah.
Absolutely. And then we have got followed by Nurses, once again, some of them are in academia as well. We have got 10 researchers, but in academia we have got 103, and then we have got public health and epidemiology. So accounting for, we have got 346 practitioners, and we have got 162 who are in academia as well. And then we have got government. So in terms of the government public health experts account, we have got 63. And we have got Twitter accounts of 12,129 non-health professionals, but I don't think that's very important to this study, is it? Okay, so some of the key findings, as Matthew was mentioned, was saying that the number of total engagement is 4,600, and so which is no, it's not. It's a different thing. Okay. So some of the key findings: the misinformed opinions relating to virus treatment and prevention, such as hydroxychloroquine and no mask, are prominent. So I'll just share the diagram with you, then you will just the word cloud, then maybe it will make a little bit more sense. But in terms of the misinformed, or in terms of the hashtag or misinformed rumor-based hashtags, I think hydroxychloroquine and no masks are quite prominent, especially during the early days of the pandemic. And in terms of the health professionals' interaction with the rumor-based and factual hashtags, in total we had 4,600 engagements. Out of that, majority of them actually have engaged with the factual hashtags, so 3,974, and they have engaged only 626 engagement with the rumor-based hashtags. So the most engaged with factual topics are pandemic slogans and physical protection. So I think, like most of you also have seen that in variety of social media platforms, how health professionals also have promoted the pandemic-related slogans and other physical protection measures. So I think that is pretty consistent with what we have found here. But in terms of the rumor-concerned conspiracies, as you can see that there are 434 engagement in terms of the conspiracy-related rumors. And then there are other rumors related to engagement related to virus severity and cure. So that was around 143. And once again, once I will share the diagram, you will see that we have seen hydroxychloroquine's prominent position in the time evaluation. And apart from that, also wanted to say that, okay, relative to the numbers, there are approximately twice as many practitioners as academics in our sample. So as you have seen from the previous table, that there are more practitioners in our samples than academics anyway. So we have got 346 practitioners compared to 162 academics. While and another remarkable finding is that the general practitioners did not engage with any rumors, but this could be attributable to the low numbers of GP accounts. So GP have the least 27, but they have got the highest engagement ratio, which is 6.7. So the engagement ratio is the number of Twitter accounts divided by the number of tweets. So which is 6.7, and nurses have quite high engagement ratio, which is 6.3. But in contrast, the most significant finding that one of the significant findings is the specialists have the highest number of accounts, 209, but they have lowest ratio, which is 3.7. And in terms of factual frame hashtags, we note that the specialists engaged most with slogans, whereas nurses were on the front line, engaged more with physical protection injunctions. So that's something we will talk more. Matthew will explain a little bit more. So as you can see that this was the fact, these are the example of fact-based hashtags that we have collected. As you can see that most of the healthcare professionals actually interacted with the fact-based hashtags. So the timeline from 1st of August to 20 September and 9th of October 2020. As you can see that some of the prominent hashtags in this domain, COVID-19, but there is a lot around Melbourne lockdown, Melbourne, then mental health, stay at home. So these are something that is quite prominent and that is also reflective of the time period and the evolution of pandemic at that particular stage. But in terms of with the health professionals' engagement with rumors, as you can see that there is quite a bit dense engagement in terms of the terms such as pedos. And Matthew also wanted to add something.
This is actually the first week of that period for both the facts and the rumors. So we have a weekly breakdown of every week, the evolution, and both of those are just the first week, I think.
Yes, so that was the first week.
So not until the end of the...
Yeah, and this one actually shows the evolution of engagement in different period of time. So we do actually have a long list of tables which shows the evolution, but I have just included some samples in here. So that was the first one. As you can see that in terms of the factual, it was Melbourne, COVID-19. It was the popular theme OSPOL, whereas in terms of the rumor, there was a lot of rumor related to the pedos. Obviously, to be honest, I'm not really familiar with that particular rumor, but pedo would, but pandemic, kill your idols and things like that. So I think a lot of sentiments or American anti-government sentiments have been reflected in these hashtags. And in terms of then from 5 September to 11 September, once again, as you can see that we have moved towards, there is little bit of more focus on hydroxychloroquine when it comes to the rumor-based hashtags, whereas in the end, like in end of September and early October, as you can see that as the time progressed, health professionals actually interacted with the fact-based hashtags more compared to the rumors. So, Matthew, wanted to add something in terms of?
Well, I mean, I don't know, what else have we got here? So, okay. Yeah, so in terms of the rumors, you can see this is the first week. So there's a very clear cluster at the top, which is around, conspiracies that aren't really related to COVID. So New World Order, Peter Wood, Agenda 21. Agenda 21 is, hashtag Agenda 21 is basically the bridge between that cluster at the top and the different cluster, which is more about COVID and hydroxychloroquine at the bottom. So it's basically functioning as a connector between these two sets of rumors. And yeah, I don't know well, the way we interpreted Kill Your Idols, it's about rejecting religion, but I don't know if that's what it means exactly. But basically there's all these unrelated rumors, and one of the findings that we had is that the rumor network was mentioning Australian locations a lot less than the fact-based rumor. Like there was a lot less mention of Melbourne, Victoria, etc., etc. So that suggests that it might be originating more from overseas, and also suggests that it might actually be an information operation, because some researchers, I think they're called, a guy called Broniewski, in 2018, talking about the anti-vax movement, they said that it was being instrumentalized by the IRA, the Internet Research Agency. I know it's always very confusing. It's not the Irish Republican Army. And basically trying to divide society by increasing these tensions. And so it would be interesting if there's anybody, if people have data sets of IRA accounts that if we could see, we could, this is similar to what I did with Rob Ackland and Mike Jensen with the OSPOL data from 2016, and we saw there was some IRA operations. So it's quite possible that some of these are, disinforming agents. So just to keep going, is that, yeah. So this is a breakdown of the different categories and who they're engaging, or sorry, what kind of conspiracies or facts they're engaging with. So this is just a general kind of breakdown. So you can see the three different main groups, but I guess we should skip ahead to the more precise breakdown. So here, what's interesting is to compare the two middle ones, specialists and nurses. As I think that's wrong. Is there 1,012 accounts with the nurses? That doesn't look right. Is that possible? I don't know if that's possible. I think there's a mistake. There's there's an extra.
Yeah, I think it's 112.
Yeah, 112. Yeah, so that's a mistake. So that's wrong. But anyway, so what you can see here. So I'll just focus on the conspiracies for a minute and the rumors. So specialists have got 38 original tweets with conspiracy theories, and they've retweeted conspiracies. What?
The number is the hashtags they used. The number of hashtags.
Right.
It's loads of tweets.
Yeah, but this is the first line here is 1,112 accounts.
Yeah.
That's correct?
No.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, okay. Yeah. We'll have to, okay, that's okay, we'll fix that. Yeah, so specialists, originally, I mean, there was a bit of change in the data. So originally we thought specialists were mainly interested in the virus origins because there's 18. And so we were trying to explain that, and we thought nurses were the ones spreading conspiracies the most, 41. But in fact, it turns out specialists are actually spreading rumors, conspiracy theories a lot too. So, and that's kind of interesting in terms of the sociology of this population, like, because we could, if you wanted to use a kind of social status or social class or sociological explanation, well, nurses, possibly are the least qualified and the least with the least cultural capital. So you could say, well, they're going to have the most engagement with anti-institutional content or with rejection of authorities and all that kind of stuff. But it doesn't really work when you talk about specialists. So that's an interesting finding, and we don't really have an explanation for why specialists are so, and maybe something we can debate later. Anyway, so in terms of the slogans, physical protection, so nurses are engaging a lot with the physical protection. They're engaging the most with the retweeting about physical protection because, they're at the front line. And specialists are engaging the most with the pandemic slogans. In terms of retweets, we're still looking mostly at retweets, right? Yeah, so public, I mean, I'm not going to focus too much on the others. Researchers, conspiracy theories, just to sort of get the things right. So, with researchers, sometimes they're just interested in a rumor, so this is also why, we have to be a little bit careful when we establish a clear connection between a person or an account and a belief, particularly with researchers, because researchers might actually be researching rumors, and so they don't. Whereas with specialists, they're not, normally they wouldn't be, that's not their field. They're not researching conspiracies, right? They're just doctors. So that's why we think there's a more valid connection in the case of specialists and nurses than with researchers. Yeah, so that's basically what I just said. So you can take this.
Yeah, so that's, obviously I'm not going to repeat what Matthew has said. So it's pretty much the same thing. It is really difficult to assess the meaning of a person's interaction with a rumor without checking each to it. So, for example, we are saying that specialists interact or they are helping to spread misinformation, but we don't really know, like in detail, like what is the rationale behind it without actually checking each of these tweets separately. So, for example, as Matthew has mentioned, academics interested in the spread of misinformation could retweet a colleague's post about a rumor. And this could also be similar in the case of a specialist as well, but it's really interesting finding, and we need to, obviously it needs and warrants further investigation that in case of a specialist, we find that by far the most used rumor frame hashtag was scamdemic, followed by plandemic, COVID hoax, and hydroxychloroquine. So maybe with hydroxychloroquine, for me, it makes sense that they might be trying to debunk the information, but to be honest, I can't really think why they would use the hashtags such as scamdemic or plandemic or COVID hoax, so which actually raises a lot of questions. And as it is stated here, these findings are surprising given that health professionals are bound by their professional code of conduct to not to spread misinformation. Obviously, their job is to protect the validity of health information. On the other hand, basically, if they use hashtags such as scamdemic or COVID hoax, it actually adds fuel to the fire, isn't it? So that is something needs to be, that's an area of concern and obviously needs to be addressed. And finally, the rumor-based frame hashtag tweets featured very little location-based term, for example, Melbourne, Victoria, etc. In contrast to factual content possible, they originate from overseas and part of the intelligence operation, as Matthew has explained previously as well. So over to you, Matthew, again.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So I guess this is a word cloud by category. So the top left is GP. So as you can see, there's no rumors, and this is quite extraordinary. Like the GPs are not engaged with any rumors. So well done, GPs. Specialists have got a lot of rumors. So this is the top right. So what we've been talking about. So the scamdemic and also CCP virus, etc. And so the reason why we haven't, the nurses are underneath. The reason why we've only got two, well, actually there's a third one, which I can't really see, but I think if I put my glasses on, I might be able to. COVID something, COVID youths, I think, COVID youths, yeah, no, just this one. Yeah, so the explanation for that is that nurses retweeted less conspiracies than specialists, but more importantly, they retweeted it more diversely and less. And there's a threshold of 5 occurrences for this word cloud. So for a hashtag to be on this word cloud, it has to appear at least 5 times in our sample. And so for nurses, those were the ones that were used the most, and the others. So that illustrates once again how deep down the rabbit hole specialists went in terms of rumors, which is quite striking. So in terms of explanations, I mentioned the sociological explanation of status and rejection of the system, but there's another network explanation, which is the echo chamber effect. And so this is something we can look at here. So this is, we've got some network maps, which we're not showing you because they're not that significant, but we've got lots of network metrics as well. And this is quite an interesting table because it shows you to what extent different subcategories connect homophiliously, that is to say to their own category, to people who are like them. Homophily is a connection to others like oneself. And so, for example, you can see that in the mention network, so the higher, so I'll explain, so the higher figure is, that means the more people are connecting to others like themselves. Okay, so if you look at the mention network, you can see, for example, that researchers and specialists have got negative homophily, which means that they are being linked to, is that right, Xiaolan? By others, yeah. So they're like the authorities in the network. So people are mentioning them a lot, and then so they're getting a lot of attention from others. In terms of replies, so public health and epidemiologists are replying to each other the most. So these conversations are happening in small, they're only connecting to others like them, have the same level of expertise, presumably. Researchers and specialists are similar. Now, in terms of retweet, it's interesting to see that the highest one is nurses. So they retweet each other. So more, and then followed by specialists. So that accords to some extent with the echo chamber theory, which means that you have these sort of dense interconnected networks, lots of connections amongst people who are similar and not much input from the outside, which favors the diffusion of information or misinformation. So that kind of corresponds to the network, to the echo chamber kind of effect that people have been talking about. There are a lot of issues with the echo chamber theory, a lot of the literature on this kind of thing. There's a very clear correlation between the research method that people use and the findings that they get. So for example, surveys tend to not find an echo chamber effect, whereas digital trace data analysis tends to find an echo chamber effect. There's a lot of questions around that, but in this case, it seems that we're collecting trace data, so we find an echo chamber effect. So we accord with the rest with this kind of self-fulfilling prophecy of the empirical choices leading to the results. Yep. So you want to?
So I don't think that we need to explain the same information once again. So I think it's the key findings. So as we have stated earlier, that the healthcare professionals have paid increasing attention to facts over rumors in the later stages of our analysis. As we have shown earlier, if we just go through the time-based hashtags, as you can see that over time, actually, health professionals have paid more attention to the factual-based hashtags compared to the rumor-based hashtags. So that was one of the key findings. And as we have seen that GPs did not engage so much, researchers, specialists, and nurses were more active. And obviously, the implication could be that focus for government outreach programs could be encouraged to GPs engage more. And it's very important to GPs actually to engage more. And a lot of the literature around the debunking misinformation focuses on how health professionals should be more involved in this particular process. But so GPs could be one of the target group in terms of debunking the information. Then nurses and specialists engage more with the rumor-based frame hashtags, as we have mentioned earlier, and nurses more homophiliously interconnected echo chamber effect. So of course, like Matthew also explained that before, that nurses tend to operate within a more dense network. That's why, which facilitates the process of misinformation or information in general. So it is the knowledge that a small number of Australian health professionals believe in and spread rumors, even conspiracies, likely to affect public trust. So of course, this is difficult to establish. Polling data reveals that health professionals are reflecting misinformed trends in the broader population. So I would encourage Matthew, if you want to add something on to this point.
That's a Guardian survey that said, about 20% or whatever it was of the Australian population believes in rumours that are not true. So in this sense, the health professionals are merely reflecting that broader understanding in the broader community, although you'd expect them to be better informed. But I guess what this points to is a kind of ethical question that we have to face about these findings. Like, we found people are breaching their professional codes of conduct, so we don't want to, we haven't, this is a quantitative kind of approach, so we're not identifying people, obviously. But in terms of policy, should there be some kind of outreach focusing on these categories to try and engage with them and understand why they're doing this? Is it going to affect trust in health professionals? We don't know, because, there is a part of the population that just doesn't believe in facts when it comes to this. So what about those who do believe in facts? Are they going to then see health professionals differently? We don't know that really. But, these people do have an obligation, and the APRA released a statement back in September, October, saying, they'd had reports, they'd had concerns expressed by the public about people saying stuff that was crazy in public forums. And then again this year, there's an article in the Australian reporting on an APRA and other APRA statements saying that, you can't say all this crazy stuff, that's you're bound. So I guess, we want to release this as a public report at some point. Maybe we'll get some traction and some interest from the media. And, the last thing we want to do is be a kind of snitches, to kind of inform on these people. But it is a matter of concern when these people who are supposed to have, kind of scientific authority are sort of going off the rails. I want to qualify that the numbers might be quite low, because it could just be a few bad apples, like 2 or 3 people constantly retweeting, and that's just part of life, that you have extreme outliers like that who sort of skew and give that impression. So I guess that's maybe something that we should include at some point, is that how many people are actually involved in this. That would help to maybe give it more of a sense of balance than this impression that all specialists are, racist conspiracy mongers.
Okay, so just to conclude,
say this together. We should read it together.
No, just go ahead, Matthew. I think I'll read the first point. You can read the second point. So, from the perspective of countering misinformation, we do not argue that Australian health professionals should play a pivotal role in stopping the spread of unverifiable and false information. So, of course, we are not arguing that health professionals should play a prominent role in terms of stopping the spread of misinformation. I think that is not their job, but obviously, and that is not the point of this paper. We have just provided some facts out there in terms of how health professionals are engaging with fact-based information as well as the rumors in social media platform. So Matthew, if you just...
Yeah, I mean, you know, there needs to be further investigation. And I mean, another thing it reminds us is that, you know, we know we live in an age where the private sphere and the social sphere and the political sphere are all merged together. But if you look back to the great political philosopher Hannah Arendt, she said, you know, the private sphere should be quite separate. You should not, emotions come into the public sphere. Now, of course, this was written before feminism taught us that the personal is political, but at the same time, in some cases, such as this, people should be allowed in an ideal world to have these wrong opinions at home and express them, you know, and not be crucified. The question is, though, do they then bring those wrong opinions into the professional sphere, not the public sphere, but the professional sphere? It's something we don't know. So yeah, it does raise a lot of questions. Originally, we were going to do this to kind of see what the impact on health professionals was of countering misinformation, because they're not trained to do that. But then when we realized that they weren't just countering, but they're actually actively participating, and then we thought, okay, well, let's look at that as well. And that's it. Thank you.
That's it. And just one more point, like this study also establishes the fact that social media blurs the personal and professional boundaries. So like findings somewhat point towards that, isn't it? Like, I mean, it might just be their personal opinion in terms of sharing the hashtag, but once again, the findings could be related to that as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you. We have about 9 minutes for questions, so I think we might just start in the room before checking in online. Kerry and David.
Oh, hi, thanks everyone, and Matthew and Kate and Xiaolan. It's a really interesting study, and it fits with a very wide range of research that's been done in the News Media Research Centre. So that's just the first thing I wanted to say, is that it complements actually very nicely the COVID-19 misinformation survey, the focus group research we're doing, and sort of research that David and I are doing around media work. So
I see
so that's just a bit of a plug
the volume bringing everything together.
No, but seriously, I think we probably need to bring this together in a symposium a bit later on here. Anyway, look, I had lots of questions. You talked about the fact that that specialists tended to be talking to one another and retweet, and I think it was nurses retweeting, etc. I was wondering whether the research that you've conducted has raised any issues around those health professionals communicating with other professionals in the public sphere, like journalists, or are you only? I mean, can you? Because I suppose the background to this question is the fact that in our research we find that Twitter is not used widely, among the public. So I can appreciate that. Health professionals are talking to one another, but are they talking to other sort of professionals in the public sphere, like journalists and politicians?
We haven't classified the others, so we can't answer that at this point. I mean, if we come back to this, if we revisit this, we might be able to slice the others categories into more defined subcategories, but at this point we can't really answer that. But the other part of that question is the reason why people study Twitter is because Twitter data is very easily available, and that contributes to the paper-demic that Irfan mentioned before, because we found some studies by medical doctors who are doing Twitter research, and I actually spent a bit of precious word count on one of those articles because I thought it was important to kind of make the point that, you know, they didn't provide any information on how they created their data set or selected accounts or anything, because they have no clue, because it's not their area. But because I think they were confined at home, it's a big deal. There's misinformation. You have to do something. So they decided to do stuff, and let's get Twitter data. And then they came up with this study, which had all these interesting claims about, you know, health professionals and blah, 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 but without any verification. So yeah.
I agree. I think as media studies experts, this is our place that we should be researching. Yay.
Get out.
Thanks for really interesting paper. I guess kind of just there's a lot there that just raises so many questions. And I guess I was sort of thinking, well, in terms of like the numbers that you're dealing with, how much scope is there now to sort of drill down a bit and kind of do some more qualitative work in terms of the content of the tweets?
That would contribute in our ethics approval.
So no scope at all then?
I don't think so. I mean, there's a privacy issue because that's the problem with this kind of data. Sorry? Yeah, this took a long time to get through ethics. Like it took us, we got we should have said actually that this is
3 months.
Thanks to the DVCRI special research funding, which we got in, I think, late May or early June last year, and we got ethics approval in September. So that's one of the reasons why we changed the project a little bit, because we were going to do focus groups with health professionals after to ask them what was their experience of dealing with misinformation, and we just ran out of time because of the process.
And initially also
Sorry, I forgot the question.
So it was about kind of positive content.
Yeah, and one of the big things, the ethics.
Trying to work out what the ethical problem would be.
Well,
Analysing the data.
Oh, I guess you could. Well, you can always identify people.
So
Yeah.
you don't need to quote a tweet. You can anonymise and then look at frames and then produce content analysis.
But somebody will still find that tweet and see who posted it.
But if you want to code like each tweet and the importance of tweets in your publication, that might be something. You can
Just couldn't use exemplars.
No, you can use exemplars, but
Yeah, I guess you could look at the content of tweets more closely, but we were so scalded by the ethics approval process that we thought we'd better stay away from any kind of too close analysis. But yeah, no, there's definitely scope to kind of drill down, particularly, I mean, with these specialists and these nurses who are, that would be fascinating to see, what's the context and what's the actual
yeah, because I guess I was thinking about it around the hydroxychloroquine. Is it the case, I mean, Scandemic suggests not, but is it the case that with hydroxychloroquine there's a debate going on among the community, given that, it's the kind of Réseaux, right, the French specialist who kind of was promoting that in the first place, and it did kind of create kind of professional controversy.
Yeah, and it was also, I mean, I don't know if they got it from a professor or Dr. Raoult, or if they got it from Trump, because he picked it up as well and he boosted it worldwide. But yeah, I mean, are there questions or?
I thought, yeah, Amanda.
Oh, hi, Amanda. Thanks for being there.
Amanda's muted.
hello.
Excellent.
Hey,
Go
Amanda.
ahead.
So,
Hi, yes, I'm at
Bell School of Pacific Studies. I met her last week at the Wright Hall Centre.
Yeah, hi Matthew and Irfan. My question is that you mentioned that hydroxychloroquine and no mask were the central rumours in this network of Australian health professionals. I remember that early on in the pandemic, the thinking was that masks weren't helpful and that thinking changed at some point. So I'm not sure whether that was before or after August.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. And actually, I should say that yesterday, Amanda invited me. Through Amanda, I was invited to this presentation organised by First Draft and Facebook around debunking and all that kind of stuff. And one of the issues that was raised is when the science changes, when the information changes, and that's a classic example where there was almost like a country by country division. In some, like some Asian countries like Korea, they were, they had experience of MERS and or SARS, and so for them, wearing masks is completely acceptable and no-brainer. Whereas in Australia, there was a lot of cultural resistance plus political wavering on whether they were necessary or not. So I guess, yeah, that goes back to David's question in terms of the context of each tweet, and possibly there was some debate around whether it was a valid thing or not from a scientific perspective. But I wouldn't say that these were the only rumours. They were prevalent, but there were lots of other rumours that were quite prevalent as well, like scandemic and all that kind of stuff, which is much more clearly saying that this is some sort of conspiracy on the part of governments or farmers, pharmaceutical companies. So, but yeah, that's a good point about the changing official narrative can have an influence. Yeah, good point.
Right, so time is exactly 1:30. Thank you so much for that fascinating talk, and thanks to the questions and the people that have joined us online. So.